You know, 2021 is going to mark the beginning of an all-new era for a lot of us. And also, it's going to be marking the official beginning of the decade in a lot of people's minds. I mean, a lot of people are going to look at 2020 and act like this year never happened. But if you're a Sonic fan and you're a Sally Acorn fan, you know, hashtag rally for Sally, if you will, then 2021 is also going to mark the anniversary of something that a lot of fans felt was probably the most controversial decision that Ian Flynn could ever make. And that's the Mecha Sally arc. That's right. And when I talk about anniversary, I'm talking a 10-year anniversary. Yeah, 10 years, a year from now, from this time frame, will mark a decade since Ian Flynn made that decision. And you know what? Fans still talk about it as probably being the most controversial thing he's ever done in the comic. I mean, it's one thing in their eyes to basically clean up and simplify the book by, removing certain characters that were no longer needed or didn't have a real purpose of being there in his eyes. Or basically just overcrowded the entire story and basically, like I said, weren't needed for any of the objectives or stories that he had in mind. You know, it's one thing to do that, and fans understand that. Go back to simplifying the books to what they were. But then, it's another to take a very beloved, iconic character in Sally Acorn, Princess Sally, if you will, and do what he did. Now, there are some fans that still praise him for taking that risk and say that what we got was pretty dang good. And because of the fact that it gave Sally more personality, it gave people a reason to care for her and care about her and basically invest in what comes next in the story. And that might be true, but still a lot of fans look at it as being the most controversial and if not sometimes the dumbest decision he's ever made. And why do they feel this way? Because a lot of fans felt that it was unnecessary, or if he was going to do it, at least do something with it that created intrigue, created, interest into what happens next. Don't rinse and repeat, which he ended up doing for a majority of the Mecha Sally run. And when I talk about rinse and repeat, real simple. You have a team in Tails and Amy and Sonic searching the globe with the help of other freedom fighters to find Sally as well as go after Eggman, and it's usually the same thing. Eggman sends Sally along with a group of bots and all that to attack a village or an environment. Sonic and friends encounter her. They fight, try to get through to her. She escapes. Rinse and repeat. Never once from what I saw, never once did Ian Flynn attempt to kind of give some in-character struggling for Sally. I mean, there was, in my opinion, maybe some hint that he was going to try to go that route, but then he decided, I'm just going to toss it aside and just rinse and repeat, right? That's what he decided to do, right? Instead of taking the opportunity that he had, and he had like a couple of opportunities within one story. Within one story, guys. Let me explain. In case you're wondering. And I've mentioned this before when I've talked about this. When Sally is sent to go take out her brother, she gives Tails, who's combating her, an option. Either rescue her or rescue the village. If she was totally gone in that part of the story, she wouldn't have given him that option, or she would have used save me or save the village option, as a ruse to attack him from behind. She would have. She would have used that as a ruse so that when Tails turns his back, she attacks him. But that didn't happen. she gave him the option, and he chose option B. And then when she arrives at her brother's hut, she just looks out the window and sees him escaping, but doesn't pursue. Why? Because that right there was the first sign, in my opinion, that maybe internally she was trying to regain control. But instead of following up on that, Ian Flynn decided just to rinse and repeat once again. He decided to rinse and repeat once again. And why? Because obviously he didn't really have a plan as to what he was going to do. I mean, sure, he'll say he had a plan of what he was going to do, but the thing is, he didn't follow through on it. He didn't follow through on it. And if you are a writer of any kind, professional, freelance, amateur, what you want to do is follow through on your story. And if you show a character having any kind of personal, eternal struggle with a decision, whether they're being mind-controlled, brainwashed, or in this case, roboticized, and they're trying to get their free will back, you follow up on it. But he didn't. Instead, we had rinse and repeat. Rinse and repeat. Why? Why have rinse and repeat? It don't make sense. It drags the story. It drags the story. And it wasn't just rinse and repeat in the main comic. When they would expand it to universe, it was rinse and repeat there too. I mean, I get Ian Flynn wanted to create a magnum opus. He wanted to create a story that would change the outlook of the book for quite some time. He wanted to create a story that basically built the freedom fighters back up and made them the fan favorites they once were in the eyes of the fans. But he, unfortunately, he failed. He failed in doing so because of the fact that he didn't have it properly planned out. Now, some people may say, well, he had to deal with a lot of issues. That's true. He had to deal with a lot of behind-the-scenes issues, but guess what? That should not be the reason why you can't make a good story. I mean, the Mecha Sally arc, I said this one time 4 years ago, and you can find it on DeviantArt. In fact, I'll provide a link. You could have easily kept the positive beginning you had with this arc going. You had the moments. A lot of people point out some of the best moments you had for this arc, and yet you didn't capitalize on them. He did not capitalize on them. And this is why now, almost 10 years later, next year or this year, depending on how you look at it, this is viewed as probably one of the most controversial story arcs in the history of the Archie Sonic run. Nearly 10 years later, 2021, it still boggles my mind as to why he did this. And when I think about it, I should say, now I know why I never wanted to read an issue, because I could see plain as day. Look, I'm back in it now. I can see plain as day. He didn't have a clue. I say this with all due respect. He didn't have a clue as to what he was going to do next. I mean, he's got one more issue of the Bad Guy spin-off book at IDW to work on, and then he's going to go off and do other things, take a break from Sonic. Hopefully that opens the door for Evan Stanley to be like, you know what? I'm going to make sure I don't make the same mistakes he's made, even though I have to keep stories coherent to what he's made. I want to make sure I have my own identity. Hopefully Evan does that. And I believe she eventually will, because you know what? Ian Flynn might get so involved with other works that he's working on, other books, that he'll probably forget about doing Sonic ever again and just say, Evan, all yours, do what you want. Who knows? But the thing is, again, going back to what I said, now I realize why I never wanted to read all the issues until that final issue, 247. It's because I knew we were just going to get the same story over and over again. A few differences here and there. I'll give them that, but I knew we were going to get the same story over and over again. And you just don't do that. What's funny is, Louis Lovehog, Linkara, at Atop the Fourth Wall, he recently uploaded the entire All-Star Batman and Robin videos or reviews that he did throughout the run of his series. All the All-Star Batman and Robin stories created by Frank Miller. And quite honestly, he did not care for any of them. He did not. He did not care for any of those issues for the way they were portrayed, for the way they portrayed characters, I should say, for the way they made certain iconic characters act, because that's not how that character should be acting. And when you look at the Mecha Sally arc, you can understand why people like me and others did not like the direction it went in. Because this was not how Sally acts. This was not the way Sally is. And again, just like Linkara pointed out in the All-Star Batman and Robin reviews that he did, there were certain moments in that run that Frank Miller seemed to show a bit of bright lightness, a light at the end of the tunnel, a sliver of hope that he'd be turning the story around, only to make it go upside down on its head again. And that's how a lot of us felt about Mecha Sally's arc. Ian Flynn had the potential to make it good. He had the opportunity to make Sally have that internal struggle to regain her free will. But he dropped it. He decided to just remain the course. All because he had this magnum opus plan to make it run all the way to 250 and beyond up to 300. Yeah. Little did he not account for the fact that what he planned to do for some of that story involved characters that legally did not really belong to Archie Comics or Sega, despite what you want to believe. He didn't account for that. And because he didn't account for that, he had to basically rush, edit, and change certain parts of it. Even though it's clear as day to a lot of us exactly what he was planning to do. And yet he didn't take into account that maybe he should hold off using certain characters until these behind-the-scenes issues were taken care of. But he didn't do that, did he? He didn't do that, did he? And again, this is why, looking back on it 10 years later, nearly 10 years later, this is one of the most controversial arcs ever. Because one, yes, I will agree what Sally did was heroic, was sacrificial. She was protecting the planet she loves, protecting the friends and family she loves. But it shouldn't take so damn long to get the story right the way it should be done. It shouldn't take so damn long to get a character to have that eternal struggle to regain the free will, look at what she's become, and then want to vow vengeance, on the person that did this to her. Or bring the person that did this to her to justice. It shouldn't take that long. But yet, it did. All because Ian Flynn wanted to have his magnum opus. Now look, I know it sounds like I'm being angry and everything, and I apologize. But the thing is, looking back on this 10 years later, it still boggles my mind as to why he would think this was a good idea. This is an all-ages comic. If you're going to go down this route, fine, but you only make it a short-term story. It's no wonder Sega was probably happy to end the partnership with Archie Comics. It's no wonder they were probably happy because, one, they didn't have to deal with screw-ups anymore. Now, I'm sure they appreciated that IDW brought in kept the same artistic and creative writing staff from the Archie book when they brought them to IDW. And I'm sure they appreciate that Ian Flynn's trying to keep it true to the games. But I can tell you this. I'm sure as heck positive, in my opinion, that they were not happy that he went the route that he did with the Mecha Sally arc. Just as I feel, in my own opinion, that they were not happy with the route he took with the Metal Virus arc. Because both arcs went on for way longer than they should, and they should have stopped when they did. But he was so determined. Just like Frank Miller. Just like Frank Miller and other writers like him. He was so determined to create his magnum opus, he didn't consider how fans would feel. I mean, even Matt, known as Mega Beatman of Mega Beatman's True Blue Reviews, you could tell when he was constantly reviewing the final parts of the Metal Virus arc that he was growing tired of this story. He was growing tired of it, and he wanted it over because he felt it was suffering basically the same issues the Mecha Sally arc did. It was suffering from repetitiveness, and he could notice this, and all he wanted for it was to end, for it to end, for it to die, if you know what I mean. But it never did. And now we're dealing with an after effect. I guarantee you one thing. Evan Stanley's probably like, okay, I got to connect some stories to tie in with the bad guy spinoff. No problem. I guarantee you once that bad guy story is over, and once this mini arc, Aftermath arc, in the main book is over, she's going to be glad to be able to finally have a little bit of freedom to do her own thing. I bet you anything. She's not going to let Ian Flynn know. She's got her own plans. Because if Ian Flynn's not going to be part of the book for a while, then why should it matter? Guys, again, it just frustrates me knowing that when I look back 10 years later, that this had to be one of the biggest and dumbest decisions he's ever made. And I say that with all due respect. Because we've all made dumb mistakes in our lives. I mean, heck, I should know personally. But the thing is, if you're committed to writing a story where you want to use it to change the status quo, then don't botch it. Do not botch it. Do not botch it. Because if you're going to botch it, it's not going to make you look good. I mean, I'm not saying that people at Marvel and DC and Image and all those Dark Horse, all those places haven't botched potentially good story arcs and all that throughout their history. They have. But for someone like me that's been a reader of the book since its beginnings and been a subscriber since the year I graduated freaking high school, if not a little afterwards, This to me has to probably be the biggest botch opportunity I've seen any writer make. And you know what's funny? I think everybody's thinking the same thing about the Metal Virus arc too, that he botched that too. He had the potential to make it good, and maybe it was. In fact, there are parts of it that I have seen that look like they're good. that look like they have potential to be expanded on in the right way. But he botched that too. You can tell. The thing is, folks, I respect the fact that Ian Flynn is a fellow fan that got to live his dream. I respect the fact that he wants to take risk to try to shake things up, change the status quo. But I cannot, with all due respect, I cannot, in good faith, say that he did a great job with this one. Because the Mecha Sally arc had the potential to be good. But he botched it. And when you think about it, this probably spelt the end between Sega and Archie. Because again, one of the things he planned to do and utilize in this story was characters that didn't belong to him. And because of the legal issues that he should have paid attention to, he had to rush edit and rush rewrite certain lines. He had to cut out certain scenes because he thought he wouldn't have a problem. All I'm going to say is this. Ian Flynn, I'll give him credit. He did what he could to clean the comic up, make it good, make it simpler. I'll give him credit that when he came up with the idea to do a soft reboot and retcon, hey, it worked out for the best. It worked out better than I think anybody expected. Even with the redesigns being a mixed bag in the minds of many people, the redesigns of the Freedom Fighters, gotta admit, he did a heck of a job. I'll give him credit there. Coming up with the soft reboot and retcon and redesign and taking the redesign of the characters he was originally going to use in the aftermath of the Mecha Sally arc and applying it to this, I'll give him credit. It worked. I'll give him credit. It worked. At least, I'll put it this way, at least he did right by putting the team together. Even though he had to come up with different ideas, maybe identical to his original ones, but he had to come up with different ideas to make it happen. But still, looking back at the Mecha Sally arc nearly 10 years later, it is probably one of the biggest botches and biggest missed opportunities, and probably one of the biggest controversial things any writer of this book had ever done. And in my honest opinion, I think Ian knows that himself. I think he knows he could have made it better. But we'll never know. And I think that's why he did the Metal Virus arc, because he wanted to make up for the mess that the Mecha Sally arc was. I think that's what he wanted. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm just over-exaggerating? Let me know down below. And let me know what your thoughts are, realizing and knowing now that it's going to be 10 years since this arc began. Let me know down below. Comment if you like. And I'll talk to y'all later.